All right. We should be live and recording. So, super exciting stuff. We are live. Something new. We are live inside of the school group, the I Thrive Collective, trying something new with the live feature inside of this group. So, we'll see how this goes. I don't know if I'm going to like it necessarily with recording, these types of videos in here because I think people are going to be able to pop in, but we'll kind of see. Hopefully, it all goes smooth. But wanted to come on here and just briefly talk about. A topic that had been on my mind the past couple of weeks. And one thing that I think is really important within your fitness journey, your fat loss journey, your body composition journey, whatever you want to call it, is knowing what are the key things for you to focus on to still make progress even when you can't be perfect. Like, what are the 1 to 2 things that are going to at least move the needle forward still for you, even if like your week is just completely hectic, all over the place, and you feel like, nothing's going right? What's one thing that you can try to master? Or what are maybe 2 things, at the most that you can master to still make progress, even when, like I said, your life is getting thrown upside down? Like maybe you have, your kids have stuff going on after school. Maybe you have stuff going on. Maybe you have stuff going on with, a family member, and maybe they aren't doing well. They're in the hospital, or they're sick, or whatever it is. Maybe the kids are sick. What are the main 1 or 2 things that you can do to keep making progress, or at least at bare minimum, maintain your progress along the way? So I'm going to talk about those 1 to 2 things, in this video, and go over what they are and why. So the number one thing, so there's 2 things, but one thing is your calorie intake. That is going to make such a big difference in your long-term progress overall. If even in your like craziest days, the busiest days you have, even when your protein's not where it needs to be, maybe if you didn't even get your walks in, or you didn't do your workouts, or you didn't eat your fruit and vegetable servings that you had planned for that day, if you can at least control your calorie intake and at least not go over your maintenance calorie number, which is around how many calories your body probably burns per day, roughly. It's always a range, it's not a specific number, but around that number. If you can at least not go over that number, even significantly, even if you go over it a little bit on one given day, it's not going to really result in that much fat gain. But if we can at least not go over it significantly, we're going to put our bodies or ourselves in such a good spot to at least maintain our results, and maybe even still lose body fat, even if our protein's not where it needs to be, even if our fruit and vegetables aren't where they need to be. If we even eat a little bit less than that maintenance, we might even still lose a little bit of body fat on that day, even if that day doesn't end up being perfect. So that is number one, because your calorie intake is going to dictate what's called your energy balance, which is the difference between the amount of energy or calories coming in through your body and the amount of calories or energy going out through your body. And when our body is in a positive energy balance, meaning we're getting more energy than what we're expending, our body will look to store it in some place. It's going to store it as maybe muscle tissue if you are lifting weights, resistance training, maybe eating enough protein. It's going to maybe store it in that way by putting on muscle, or it's going to store it in what's called glycogen, which is in our liver and muscles, which is like the storage form of carbohydrates, which those areas help with our gym performance in our muscles. But the liver, or the glycogen in our liver, helps to maintain a proper blood sugar level. So that's kind of the second place those extra calories are going to be stored. And the third main place it's going to be stored is through the addition of body fat. So if we can control our calorie intake, at least at bare minimum, even when our food choices and everything like that, our schedule is completely hectic, if we can at least control our calorie intake, we are going to prevent that excessive positive energy balance. So we aren't going to have that excessive fat storage on that day. Even if those calories literally, like let's say you burn roughly 2,500 calories a day. Even if you have 23, 24, 2,500 calories of literally just like Skittles, candy, chocolate, not what you would consider quote unquote healthy foods. If you are still burning 2,500 calories on that day, your body is not going to be in a positive energy balance, so it's not going to store any additional body fat if that happens. So if we can at least control that aspect, that goes a long way with maintaining our fat loss long term and not going backwards. Or, negative energy balance, which is eating less calories than what we burn. If our overall goal is fat loss, maybe our fruit and vegetable intake is is terrible on this day. Maybe our protein intake is super low. Maybe we didn't get our workouts in. But maybe if we can at least still eat maybe even below our maintenance calories, we probably will still see a little bit of fat loss on that day, even if our protein is maybe really low. Now, it's not something we want to do all the time, like a low calorie intake or eating less than what we burn while having a low protein intake, because that can cause muscle loss over time potentially. But if it's just one given day, or maybe even a couple of given days, maybe even a weekend, a few days of having a low protein intake while being in a calorie deficit, being in fat loss, is not going to cause a significant amount of muscle as long as your workouts are still happening, which I kind of talk about later in this. Maybe a little bit of foreshadowing there on what the second thing is. But if you can at least even be in somewhat of a negative energy balance. So let's say if normally, the amount of calories you burn is roughly, let's say 2,000 per day, and you're aiming for, let's say 1,500 calories per day. So a 500 calorie deficit. Well, maybe things are hectic and maybe, hitting the 1,500 calorie mark is extremely tough. Doesn't mean you have to go all the way up to 2,000 or over 2,000. You could maybe still make a conscious effort to maybe say, hey, maybe let's at least try to not go over 1,700. So that way you're still in a roughly maybe 300 calorie deficit. And this is like simple math that I'm using and doesn't necessarily play out exactly like this in the body in real time. But just so you can kind of get the gist of what I'm referring to, you're still probably in a little bit of a calorie deficit and might even squeak out some fat loss. So the number one thing that you can really focus on to still see results, even if you feel like you're having a day of poor food choices, like meaning not a whole lot of whole foods, you feel like your protein intake is really low, you're not hitting your steps, you're not hitting your workouts, is at bare minimum, try to control your portion size in order to control your calorie intake. Even, like I said, even if it's through things like Pop-Tarts, Skittles, candies, if you're controlling those calories, your body won't magically somehow store extra body fat. Now, the second variable that you can really focus on to still see really great progress and I would say maybe not even in a given day, but let's say in a week span where, let's say your nutrition just is not really on point, your calories are kind of all over the place, they're up and down, maybe your protein intake is a little bit up and down, maybe your fruit and vegetables aren't where they need to be, a lot of processed foods, not a whole lot of whole foods. If you can at least stick to your normal workout routine as much as possible while pushing yourself in those workouts. Now that's kind of a second caveat or third caveat. You have to push yourself in them. You can't just go through the motions necessarily and not give full effort, which I'll kind of talk about what that looks like in a second. But if you can stick to your normal workout program, especially if you are doing lifting weights or resistance training, that will go a long way because that is going to help to keep your muscle around. A lot of times, like there's this hype around like protein for building muscle, which protein is important for building muscle. Don't get me wrong, like protein is really important. There's a reason why we have protein goals, for building muscle. And there's a reason why muscle is made up of amino acids, protein, and all that. But the biggest stimulus you get for maintaining muscle or building muscle doesn't really come from protein. Like if you were to not lift weights, or maybe you were to lift weights but not push yourself hard enough with your sets and not get close enough to failure, and you were to just kind of like go through the motions, lift weights a little bit until you felt a little bit of a burn, but you didn't actually get close to failure with those sets. If you were to do that, not train intensely or not lift weights at all, but eat a high protein diet, you're not really going to build that much more muscle. Like protein in itself isn't necessarily what's called anabolic. Like it's not going to cause you to build more muscle just eating a high protein diet. You have to have that lifting weights, that resistance training stimulus first, and that actually causes your body to send signals to itself, or your brain to send signals to your body to, hey, like we need to start, building more muscle, and it provides that stimulus that we need to do that. And the protein we eat through our diet, those just provide the building blocks that we need to maximize that. But the biggest stimulus we get for building muscle comes from our workouts. So if we have a few days that are a little bit lower in protein than what's like ideal and optimal, but we're training really hard in the gym and really pushing ourselves in our workouts and still completing those consistently, hitting each muscle group twice per week, getting 1 or 2 reps away from failure with each set, really making each set hard where you're doing your bicep curl and the rep is super slow on the way up and you're really grinding, making ugly faces because it's really, really hard and tough. If you're doing that still, even if you have a low protein intake for like an entire week, there's a good chance you're probably going to still build a little bit of muscle, especially if you are new to lifting weights and resistance training. And there's a really great chance you're still going to maintain your muscle, especially if it's something for like a week's time span, even a few weeks. So I think a lot of times people will think like the two most important variables are calories and protein when it comes to like getting through tough times when it comes to executing as well as you want to. But I would say even a little bit more important than protein necessarily is your lifting, the strength training you're doing, and getting close to failure is probably the second most important variable. Because if your energy balance is in the right spot, your calorie intake, aka, and you are not in a positive energy balance where you're gaining body fat, and you are providing your body the stimulus, the physical stimulus of lifting weights, resistance training to either build muscle or keep the muscle that you have around, those are the two most important things for just kind of getting by when times are tough. Like I said, when your schedule's all over the place, when kids have this going on after school and that after school, and maybe you're losing a little bit of focus with planning your meals, and you're losing a little bit of focus with getting your walks in and getting your step goal. If we can at least consistently at least not go over that calorie maintenance level for you, that approximate calorie maintenance level, and if we can at least keep those workouts in, we're still probably going to make some great progress in some way. And maybe your overall goal is fat loss and you don't necessarily keep your calories as low as maybe what you need to. Maybe you overeat and eat around your calorie maintenance level for an entire week. If you still have that lifting weights and resistance training in there, then there's a good chance a lot of those extra calories are just going to be used for like recovery from your workouts or fuel for your next workouts, assuming you're still doing them. And that could provide even more like muscle gain potentially than even if you were actually following your fat loss range of calories and eating less. So I think those two things are super important. So when you are having a very stressful time, like I said, whether it's kids stuff going on, family stuff going on, work stuff going on, if you can continue to at least keep your calories where they need to be roughly and not go over that maintenance level and continue to at least hit those workouts consistently, getting close to failure, even if your step goal isn't where it needs to be, even if your protein intake is a little bit lower than usual this week, that will go a long way. So hopefully this was helpful. Like I said, the way I like to coach is I really like to highlight what are the key things that are going to give you the biggest bang for your buck when it comes to progress, especially for like a weekend away or a week where work is crazy or a week where you're really stressed because of this going on and that going on. And I think those are the two most important things. Now, obviously, long term, we don't want to eat a super low protein intake long term. Long term, we don't want to miss our step goal consistently, right? Because that's going to hinder our long-term progress. But in the short term, getting by for a weekend, getting by for a week, when we have some tough stuff going on and we know we're not going to be able to be perfect, focus on those two things the most. So hopefully this was helpful and eye-opening, and I will see you guys in the next one.